We have all seen GoFundMes and various fundraisers for people going through situations that are real life nightmares. Sometimes their stories pull at our heartstrings and we donate or at least try to help spread the word. We can't imagine what they're going through and we hope it never happens to us. And then there are others that are jealous of the money and attention that those people get, and they want some of it for themselves, even if it means lying and committing crimes to get it. In this video, we're going to look at some well-known cases of people pretending to have cancer, and also take a peek at some lesser-known cases that, frankly, blew my mind. There were so many, actually, that I had to cut a few out. It really is an epidemic. Hi, my name is Shelby, and this is Merrily Morbid, the channel where we explore all things that are at least a little bit dark, from deadly diseases to natural disasters, from true crime to man-made catastrophes. So if that's your kind of thing, come along and let's get morbid. In 2022, Madison Russo, known as Maddie, began sharing her battle with cancer on TikTok and Facebook. She showed pictures and videos of what it was like to be a 19-year-old living with not just one, but multiple types of cancer. She had pancreatic cancer, leukemia, and a football-sized tumor on her spine. Over 400 people who came across her story donated to her GoFundMe, and she received money from a pancreatic cancer foundation. As her story began to get more and more attention, it began to come across the FYPs of people in the medical field and other cancer patients. And that's when things turned. Those people noticed things that didn't look right or didn't make sense. She claimed that she hadn't lost her hair because of a hair care regimen, in spite of supposedly being on a type of chemo that would definitely have caused hair loss. She was seen in photos using medical equipment incorrectly, for example, using the wrong type of tube as a nasogastric feeding tube, and quickly, it was all over. Maddie Russo was exposed for having faked cancer. She bought medical equipment and doctored photos in an attempt to make her story seem legit. She even stole photos from scans of real cancer patients and tried to pass them off as her own. She was arrested for her scamming ways, and in October 2023, she was given a suspended prison sentence of 10 years, meaning that if she stayed out of trouble while on probation for the 3 years she was given, she would stay out of jail. She was also sentenced to 100 hours of community service in order to pay back the $39,000 she had stolen. When asked why she did it, she told the judge that she hoped that having cancer would help her broken family come back together again. But then why set up a GoFundMe and apply for and accept money from a cancer charity or even upload to social media? There is no way that her family was the sole reason for her charade. But you know what really pisses me off about this particular story? The judge said, serious crimes have serious consequences. Yet, she basically has to do community service and pay the money back. As long as she doesn't get in trouble, she doesn't do any prison time, and that's just a slap on the wrist, and doesn't do much to dissuade others from similar crimes. In the fall of 2011, Jami Toler, a 27-year-old Arizona woman who worked at a hospice center, had to break it to everyone she knew that she had breast cancer and she was going to need a double mastectomy. And understandably, she wanted to get reconstruction afterwards. Normally, a mastectomy and then reconstruction would be covered by insurance. But because this is America, not everyone has insurance, and Jami Toler didn't. So she looked to her friends and family and her coworkers to help. Collectively, they were able to gather $8,000 to cover her surgeries. Soon after, she started leave from her job and underwent surgery. It was during her recovery that her employer asked for a doctor's note. Kind of a jerk move, considering it's situations like these why jobs even require them. But it turns out that she couldn't produce a doctor's note. And that's because the surgery she had wasn't the kind that she had told everyone it had been. She didn't have a double mastectomy and reconstruction. She got a boob job. She didn't have cancer. It wasn't a reconstruction, it was a straight up breast augmentation. And those aren't usually covered by insurance. Hence why she came up with the story about having cancer, knowing that people would donate. It's pathetic. And that's what the judge thought too when she was convicted in 2012. She ended up taking a plea deal. She got 1 year in jail, 3 years probation, and she was required to pay the money back. Here is where I beg you to subscribe to my channel. Times are hard, and as federal funding is cut from program after program, charities are going to have to step up to help bridge the gap, and that's where we come in. I ask that you comment, subscribe, like this video, or any combination of those. And when my channel is finally monetized, I promise to donate 10% of everything that I ever make to charities chosen and voted on by you, my subscribers. And I will show you the receipts. So please subscribe and let's work towards getting to 1,000 subscribers. Also, try checking out some of my other videos to help me out in the algorithm. Sarah Jane Cavanaugh was a former Marine who worked as a social worker for the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Providence, Rhode Island. She had learned that she had lung cancer, which she believed she'd developed after exposure to burn pits and inhaling particles from an exploded IED during her deployment in Iraq. She also served in Afghanistan, and from her time in the Middle East, she was not only awarded a Purple Heart for being wounded in a war zone, but she was also awarded a Bronze Star with a V, which denotes a person who has performed an act of valor in combat. And of course, it's not hard to believe that she'd developed PTSD too. Except, as you can already guess, it's all lies. She was never a soldier, let alone a Marine. So the medals that she showed off to so many were acquired illegally. For those who don't know, pretending to have been given military medals when you haven't earned them, it's called stolen valor, and it's a big no-no. People have been maimed and died for those medals, and then people just swoop in and make a mockery of them. It's disgusting. During that time that she claimed to have been a veteran suffering from cancer and PTSD, she received more than $250,000 in donations and veterans benefits. She had a GoFundMe, of course, which was titled "Help Sarah Win Her Battle." It raised almost $5,000, but that was nothing in comparison to the $207,000 that she received from the Wounded Warriors Project between 2017 and 2021. She was also a participant in an art therapy program for veterans, which had a limited number of spots. A veteran who met her through the Wounded Warriors Project said that his friend had applied to the same program but had been denied the spot. His friend, who could have possibly greatly benefited from the program, ended up self-eliminating. She took that spot from an actual vet who needed it and was actually suffering. Her lies were only discovered when she applied for funds from a charity called the Hunter 7 Foundation. They help veterans who have cancer and other illnesses connected to their military service. The charity did a background check to verify her service, and that's when they learned that she had never been in the military and that she was actually just a social worker. She used her position at the VA Medical Center to gain knowledge of the military and steal identities and information about veterans who were registered there. She could have gotten the maximum of 24 years in prison, but she lucked out and took a plea deal which got her 6 years in prison and required her to pay back the over of $250,000 that she stole. Good luck with that. Belle Gibson was once a beloved wellness influencer from the land down under, Australia. Prior to her fame, Belle worked for a private health company where she dealt with medical claims. But when her social media began to take off, she moved on to bigger and better things. At first, Belle began sharing her brain cancer diagnosis with online mom groups and skateboarding forums. Later in 2012, she began her Instagram. It wasn't too out of the normal. Healthy recipes, selfies, inspirational quotes. But she began to claim that she was treating her brain cancer with nothing more than a healthy diet. And within a year, she had over 200,000 followers. The next thing you know, in 2013, she got a group of developers to help her create an app called The Whole Pantry, which contained only healthy recipes. In 2013, it was the most downloaded food app in the Apple App Store. People also downloaded the app believing that all, most, or even some of the proceeds were supposed to be donated to charity. Then, just as quickly, a book deal followed. Penguin Publishing, yep, that Penguin, worked with Belle to publish a cookbook called The Whole Pantry, of course, named after the app. Now, that would be shocking, considering her whole book was about her diet treating her cancer, which was a total fabrication. For those who don't know, publishing companies are required by law to fact-check information before publishing, and they absolutely didn't do that when it came to Belle Gibson. Everything crumbled so fast. Penguin was fined, and the book was pulled from sales. Her app was immediately taken off the Apple App Store, and Belle Gibson was exposed as a fraud. Turns out she never had any sort of cancer, and people could tell because in spite of claiming to have developed secondary cancer, she never appeared to be sick or frail. Now, this is what is frustrating. She made hundreds of thousands of dollars from her lies. She used others' stories and lied about charitable donations. It's like she's allergic to telling the truth. She can't be honest long enough to even tell an interviewer how old she is.
How old are you?
Well, I live knowing, as I've always known, that I would be 26.
Okay, Belle.
I
This is a really, really simple question. How old are you?
believe that I'm 26.
And after all of that, she wasn't required to serve any jail time, but was sentenced by the Australian court to pay a fine of 410,000 Australian dollars, or the equivalent of 258,000 American dollars. Yet, she hasn't paid a single dime 9 years later. Belle has gone on with her life and become more famous or infamous now than ever because Netflix has dropped a 2-part documentary series on her scams, and they also dropped a 6-episode limited drama based on her life. And as you can imagine, Australians are left angry knowing that she has just gotten away with it. Brittany Ozarowski was a 21-year-old woman from New York City who had cancer. At least that's what she told people. What kind of cancer, you ask? Apparently, all of them. No, I'm not kidding. She claimed that she had cancer in her bones, brain, stomach, thyroid, and her ovaries. She claimed to have been a cancer patient at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and claimed that her treatments were costing her $33,000 a day. With medical debt like that, she went around to local businesses and asked to put out donation jars, because that's going to make a difference. She had a website to collect donations, and she often panhandled. Even her family was trying to help her. When her grandma decided to move to Florida to live out the rest of her days, she sold her house and gave $100,000 of the proceeds to Brittany to help pay for her cancer treatments. Her dad cashed out his 401k so he could give money to his daughter. People believed her. I mean, she was frail looking and she looked sick. And she was sick, but not with cancer. Brittany was a big-time heroin addict. The only reason people began to question if she had cancer or not was because, unlike a lot of cancer patients, she hadn't lost her hair. And when questioned about it, she said vitamins, because that's not suspicious. Now, in some cases, there is something that can be done to prevent hair loss with certain types of cancer called cold capping, but that's for another video. What doesn't help is vitamins or shampoos. Anyway, the next thing you know, Brittany was arrested in 2013 for faking cancer in order to get money to support her drug dependency. She'd previously been arrested several times on drug charges, but forged doctor's notes to get out of court dates. When she finally faced the consequences of her actions, she initially pled not guilty to 24 counts of fraud. She ended up changing her mind and pled guilty and was ordered to go to a 2-year drug treatment rehab program thing. She was given 1 year of probation after completing the program and would be required to pay $10,000 in restitution. But at some point, she was kicked out of the drug treatment program for what her lawyer claimed was smoking a cigarette. True or not, we don't know. But regardless, the judge decided that what she really needed at that point was jail time, and she was sentenced to 3 years. Elisabeth Finch was a well-loved and respected Hollywood writer and later producer who had worked on True Blood, The Vampire Diaries, and Grey's Anatomy. She had the education too. She received a creative writing degree from Carnegie Mellon before going to the University of Southern California for film school. In 2012, Elisabeth wrote an article for Elle magazine describing her diagnosis and treatment of chondrosarcoma, a rare form of cancer that begins in the cartilage and affects the bones. The article was seen by a Hollywood executive who offered Elisabeth a job as a writer on the extremely popular show Grey's Anatomy. The storylines that she ended up writing on the show were supposedly based on her own experiences. She'd been living with a spinal tumor, in addition to the previously mentioned cancer. At one point, she accidentally became pregnant while going through chemo. Because of the risks to her and the fetus, she said that she had terminated the pregnancy. Because of the bone cancer, at one point she had part of one of her legs removed, and the chemo had damaged one of her kidneys. She ended up getting a transplant, and she told people that the person who had donated a kidney to her was none other than Anna Paquin, who she'd worked with on True Blood. Because her life wasn't tragic enough, she lost a good friend in the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, which killed 11, where she had attended religious services in college. She went to Pittsburgh to help with the burial of her friend. Later, she revealed that her older brother had been very abusive to her as kids and that he had self-eliminated. She told people that he'd done it in such a way that it would force her, the next of kin, to have to be the one to pull the plug, so to speak. How could she keep going through tragedy after tragedy? Except, of course, she didn't. None of it was true. She never had cancer, never terminated a pregnancy because of cancer treatment, never had a kidney transplant, much less than get one from Anna Paquin. She had previously attended the Tree of Life Synagogue, but that had been years and years before, and she didn't know anyone at the time of the attack. As far as we know, her brother hadn't abused her and wasn't even dead. He's a doctor, alive and well, and living in Florida. Many of the stories that she told people were pieces of other people's stories that she Frankensteined into one big lie. It was Finch's own wife who was the first to figure out that she was lying about pretty much everything. And she ended up blowing the whistle and telling Elisabeth's bosses. She was immediately placed on administrative leave while more and more lies came out. Surprisingly, she actually admitted to many of her lies. When asked why she did it, she said it was because she liked the feeling of people doting on her, which she first experienced after having a knee replacement. It's sad because apparently she was very talented, but she threw away her career and her reputation for attention. If you want to know more about her story, Peacock has a 3-part documentary all about Elisabeth Finch called Anatomy of Lies. In 2010, Jessica Vega, a young mom of 1, told people that she had leukemia and wasn't given long to live. And her dying wish was to have her dream wedding. When she went to try bridal gowns on, she told the owner about her illness, and they felt so bad for her, the 25-year-old woman who was dying, that they decided to donate the wedding dress, along with free alterations, a wig, and shoes. When her story was shared with others, other donations came in. She received money, free plane tickets, hotel rooms for a honeymoon in Aruba, and the wedding photographer offered their services for free. The wedding was in May, and only 4 months later, her husband learned who exactly he had married. A liar and a scammer. He outed her to the local paper and filed for divorce. He moved to Virginia, but she actually followed him there, and they soon reconciled. And then they had a second child. He told people that she needed help and not punishment, but the law didn't agree. In April 2012, she was arrested and subsequently given 8 weeks in jail. She was also required to pay back the over $13,000 that she'd stolen and was given 300 hours of community service and 5 years probation. Okay, but this is where it gets wild. I am absolutely shocked that this case hasn't gotten the same national attention as some other cancer fakers. In 2022, 10 years after serving jail time for her scam, she was arrested again, but this time for something so much worse. She tried to kidnap a 4-year-old little girl in a cart at Walmart. As you can probably guess, she is no longer with her ex-husband, nor does she have custody of her kids. In regards to hearing about the latest arrest, he admitted her ex-husband, admitted that he no longer believes that she's mentally ill, and his exact words were, "I think that she is absolutely evil, and she knows exactly what she is doing." I can't find an update as to what actually happened in court following her arrest for kidnapping, but hopefully we'll find some answers soon. It's time for the trivia question of the day. The answer to last week's question regarding the explosive decompression of the de Havilland Comet was metal fatigue due to the square shape of the windows, hence why airplane windows now always have rounded corners. Shout out to Elusive Lemons for getting the correct answer. Now for today's question. The first person to comment the correct answer down below will get a shout out in next week's video. Now known as fictitious disorder, what is the name of the disorder named for a literary German noble, which describes a person who fakes illness or injury to gain attention from others? Possibly the most famous cancer faker is none other than Scamanda, or Amanda Riley, as she is legally known. I first heard of her only last year when I listened to the over 6.5 hour podcast called Scamanda, and it blew my mind. Her cancer story began in 2012 when she began blogging her journey with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which later developed into lung cancer. A lot of people felt terrible for her. She was such a likable person, and she was only in her 20s. She had just gotten married recently, and here she was with terminal cancer. She was dying. At least that's what she told people. Now, what blows my mind about some of these people is that they claim to have terminal cancer. Basically, it means that the chances are that the cancer is going to be your cause of death, and sooner rather than later. I do not understand what these people's end game is when it comes to making these types of claims. You really think that people are just going to believe that you had a miraculous recovery from cancer when you were supposed to be dying at any time? How do they think that they're going to get away with it? Now, back to Amanda Riley. According to our overlord, Google, Hodgkin's lymphoma actually has a pretty good survival rate of 80% at 10 years. But the type of lung cancer that has been associated with it, small cell lung cancer, has dismal survival rates of only 7% at 5 years. What is really ridiculous about her story, though, is that when she became pregnant, she told a skeptical friend that her pregnancy was reversing the cancer. This would be laughable if it wasn't so horrendous. Pregnancy, if anything, can cause or even worsen cancer, but in no world does it cure any form of cancer. More and more people were beginning to question Amanda's story, but nobody wanted to come out and say it, because what if she actually did have cancer? You'd be an asshole. But someone sent a journalist an anonymous tip, and that reporter knew a good story when she heard one. So in 2015, 3 years after Amanda began spreading her lies, that journalist, Charlie Webster, began investigating. And boy, she found a rabbit hole that just got deeper and deeper as she went. She began calling hospitals that Amanda had claimed to have been a patient at, which normally, because of HIPAA, they wouldn't be able to share any information. But you know who HIPAA doesn't apply to? People who aren't your patients. So they were able to confirm that they didn't have any cancer patients under that name. Busted. Amanda often faked sick to receive care at emergency rooms so she could get proof that she was in the hospital for her blog. Other times, she would literally just walk around hospitals to get proof, or she would straight up steal medical equipment, stuff that wouldn't necessarily be missed. IV hoses and bags and bandages and that kind of thing. For other medical equipment like oxygen tanks, things that she couldn't easily take from a hospital, she would buy herself at medical supply stores. You have to be sick in the head to pull this kind of crap. But it's even more sick when you consider that she probably got the idea to fake cancer from a child who actually had cancer that she knew well. Her husband's former stepchild had leukemia as a kid. And it's sick to actually have a cancer survivor in your family whose fight you were actually present for, and then go on to pretend to have cancer yourself. Sick. It is just sick. It's also sickening when you learn that over the years, Scamanda conned over $100,000 from hundreds of people who were just trying to help a family out with the financial burden a cancer diagnosis carries in this country. And it was the money that was her downfall, as it is with all of them. It's not illegal to pretend to have cancer, but it is illegal to accept donations under false pretenses. So, in 2020, it hit the fan, and she was finally arrested under wire fraud charges. Now, you'd think that was the end, but no. Even in prison, she continued to feign illness. After arriving in prison, she ended up in the emergency department 24 times in the first 18 months and was even caught trying to manipulate medical tests. She even applied for compassionate release, which of course she was denied, saying that she was not getting the proper treatment for whatever sickness that she still claims to have. In 2024, her husband filed for divorce, and then earlier this year, Hulu released a 4-part docuseries on her, aptly titled Scamanda, just like the podcast. And that's it for today. Again, like and subscribe, comment the answer to the trivia question below, and if you aren't bored yet and still want more from me, check out my binge playlist. And as always, don't forget to be merry, but stay morbid.